My name is Delaney Ford. I'm 38 years old and I live in Madison, Wisconsin. For years, I've known my family sees me as the afterthought, the reliable one who shows up, helps out, and never complains. I always told myself it was fine, that lowering my expectations would bring peace. It didn't. That changed on my birthday this year. The party was at my house, lights dimmed, cake on the table, everyone gathered like nothing was wrong. My brother arrived late as usual with his 10-year-old daughter trailing behind him. She walked straight to the cake, looked me dead in the eye, shoved it off the table onto the floor, and sneered, "Go on. Eat it." The whole room burst into laughter. Not awkward chuckles, full roaring laughter. A few people shifted uncomfortably, but no one said a word to stop it. Not my parents. Not my brother. I stood there frozen while the mess spread across the floor. I didn't yell. I didn't flip the table. I just stayed silent. Later that night, my father sent a message. "Never show your face in front of us again." Everyone agreed. The family group chat lit up with support for him. I replied calmly, "Then tomorrow I'll disappear from the family account." Before midnight, the chat exploded. Missed calls piled up nonstop. Texts flooded in, some angry, some pleading, some accusing me of being dramatic. I didn't answer any of them. That was the moment I realized some families don't just play favorites. They discard you when you stop playing along. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, stick around. Hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. The real fallout is just beginning. Everything started long before my birthday. My parents had always made it painfully obvious who mattered most. My older brother, Jonathan Hayes, 42 years old, could disappear for months. Miss holidays, forget important dates. Yet whenever he finally showed up, my mother and father treated him like he had just won a prize. He would breeze in with some excuse about work or traffic, and they would hug him, pour him a drink, and act like the sun had finally come out. Meanwhile, I was the one who drove my mother to every doctor's appointment when she felt too tired to drive herself. The one who spent an entire weekend repainting their living room because they couldn't afford a professional. The one who listened patiently whenever they needed to complain about money, neighbors, or anything else. Those efforts never got acknowledged. Jonathan posted a picture of a new watch he bought, and Mom left a comment, "So proud of my golden boy," followed by a string of hearts. I shared that I had closed a major deal at work, and the post sat there with zero reactions from them. Their granddaughter became the shining star of the family. At 10 years old, she had already mastered the unspoken rules. She watched her father brush me off during family visits, rolling his eyes when I spoke, changing the subject the moment I opened my mouth, and she imitated him perfectly. She would walk right past me without a hello, make cutting remarks about my outfit or my house being boring. And my parents would chuckle and say she was just spirited. I kept telling myself it was innocent, childish behavior, that she was only repeating what she saw, but each little jab landed harder than the last. The birthday party was meant to be simple and relaxed, just a small gathering at my house in Madison to mark turning 38. I invited my parents, Jonathan and his daughter, and a handful of close friends. The living room had soft string lights draped across the windows, a few balloons tied to the chairs, and the chocolate cake I baked myself centered on the dining table, my name written in neat white frosting. I wanted the day to feel warm and personal. My friends arrived on time, brought thoughtful little gifts, and the atmosphere felt genuinely light for the first time in a while. Then Jonathan pulled into the driveway 20 minutes late. He walked through the door with his daughter right behind him, offering no apology, just a quick wave to the room. His daughter scanned the table, locked eyes on the cake, stepped forward without hesitation, placed both hands on the edge, and shoved. The entire cake slid off and crashed onto the hardwood floor with a heavy, wet splatter, frosting spraying across the shoes and carpet. She looked directly at me and sneered, "Go on, eat it." The room erupted in laughter. My father slapped his knee and roared. My mother covered her mouth and giggled through tears, saying, "Oh, she's just teasing Delaney. Lighten up." A couple of my friends exchanged uneasy glances and shifted in their seats, but no one spoke up. No one told her it was wrong. No one offered to help clean. Jonathan simply shrugged, muttered, "Kids will be kids," and reached for a slice from the backup desserts in the kitchen as if the whole thing was a minor inconvenience. I stood frozen with frosting splattered on my shoe's pulse, hammering in my ears, cheeks burning. Part of me wanted to raise my voice to demand an apology, to ask why no one ever defended me, but I swallowed every word. I grabbed a roll of paper towels from under the sink, knelt down, and started wiping up the mess while everyone else carried on talking and laughing. My hands trembled as I scrubbed chocolate from the floorboards, but I kept my face neutral, said it was no big deal that accidents happen. Deep down, though, something shifted permanently. I had spent so many years convincing myself the favoritism was bearable, that I could absorb it without breaking. Watching my niece destroy something I had made with care, while my entire family cheered her on, I finally saw the truth. They didn't merely prefer Jonathan and his daughter. They enjoyed watching me shrink. And in that moment, quietly cleaning frosting off my own floor, I realized I might not be able to keep taking it much longer. Right after the laughter died down, I stood up. I walked straight to the front door, grabbed my coat from the hook, and stepped outside without saying another word to anyone. The cold Madison air hit my face as I closed the door behind me, shutting out the noise of the party that was still going on inside. I drove home in silence, hands tight on the wheel, mind replaying the moment over and over, the cake hitting the floor, the laughter, the complete lack of anyone stepping in to stop it. When I got home, I sat in the dark living room for a long time, letting the quiet sink in. Later that night, my phone buzzed with a message from my father. The text was short and cold. "Never show your face in front of us again." No explanation, no question, just that final line. I stared at the screen for several minutes, feeling the weight of it settle in my chest. My mother followed with her own message a minute later. "We agree with Dad. This is too much." Then Jonathan chimed in. "You always overreact. Just chill." I read each one carefully, letting the words burn in. I typed back once, short and calm. "Understood. Then tomorrow I'll disappear from the family account." I hit send and immediately opened the group chat settings. I removed myself, muted all notifications, and archived the conversation. That was it. No dramatic exit, no long explanation. I also stepped back from the informal role I had played for years, organizing holiday dinners, coordinating gifts for my parents' anniversaries, being the one who always remembered to check in. Those responsibilities ended that night. The fallout came fast. Within minutes, the group chat, now without me, exploded with activity. Missed calls started rolling in from my father, then my mother, then Jonathan. Texts poured through from numbers I had known my whole life. My mother wrote, "Delaney, this is immature. Come back to the chat and talk like an adult." My father added, "You can't just walk away from your family over something so small." Jonathan sent a longer one. "You're making a big deal out of nothing. His daughter is just a kid. She didn't mean it like that. Stop being so sensitive." I didn't respond to any of them. I turned off my phone and went to bed. The next morning, I woke up to more missed calls and a voicemail from my mother. Her voice sounded frustrated and a little hurt. "Delaney, we didn't mean to upset you, but you need to stop this nonsense. Family doesn't quit on each other." I listened to it once, then deleted it without replying. For the first time in years, the silence felt like power instead of pain. I had always been the one to smooth things over, to apologize, even when I wasn't wrong, to keep the peace at the cost of my own dignity. That night, I chose something different. I chose to stop carrying the weight of their expectations alone. The group chat kept buzzing for hours more. Accusations, more pleas, more attempts to guilt me back in, but I stayed out. I didn't look at the messages again. I didn't need to. The decision was made, and the door I had kept open for so long was finally closed. When a few months passed after my birthday, I started seeing clearly that my silence wasn't changing anything for them. My parents kept posting about his daughter on Facebook and Instagram almost daily. Pictures of her at school events, dance recitals, or just smiling in new clothes came with captions full of pride. "Our little superstar aced her spelling test," or "Look at this talented girl, future champion." Every post got dozens of likes and comments from relatives and friends. I scrolled past them without reacting. My own updates, a promotion at work, a weekend hike, even a new recipe I tried, received nothing from them. Not a like, not a heart, not a single word. It was as if my life had become invisible to the people who raised me. Then the message arrived one evening from my mother. It was longer than usual, typed in all caps at parts for emphasis. "Delaney, we still consider you family if you admit your mistake and come back. We love you, but love comes with conditions. You can't just disappear and expect us to chase you forever." My father added his own note underneath. "Mom is right. Stop acting like the victim. Family means putting pride aside." The words felt like a slap. Not angry, but calculated, as if they were giving me one last chance to fall back in line. I read the message twice, then set my phone down. I didn't reply. I didn't like the post. I didn't comment. I simply stopped engaging with any of it. No more scrolling through their profiles late at night, no more hoping for a sign that they noticed me. I blocked their stories from appearing in my feed and turned off notifications for family tags. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet and deliberate. The shift inside me happened slowly but steadily. The sharp pain from the birthday night softened into something colder and clearer. I realized they weren't going to change, not because they couldn't, but because they didn't want to. They had built a world where Jonathan and his daughter were the only ones who deserved celebration, and I had spent too long trying to fit into a space that was never reserved for me. Protecting myself meant accepting that truth without trying to fix it anymore. I started noticing how much energy I had wasted on hope. Every time I had reached out in the past, calling to check on them, sending cards, showing up when they asked, it had been met with indifference or criticism. Now, with the distance I created, I felt lighter. The silence on their end no longer felt like rejection. It felt like confirmation. I was finally allowing myself to stop performing for approval that would never come. That realization brought a strange kind of peace. I didn't hate them. I didn't wish them ill. I just understood that my place in their lives had always been conditional, and I was done meeting conditions that kept changing. From that point on, I focused on the people and things that didn't require me to shrink. The hurt didn't disappear overnight, but it stopped controlling my days. I had begun to build something stronger than the family I was born into, a life that didn't depend on their validation. After the coldest days gradually passed, I realized it was time to focus entirely on myself. I poured everything into work, showing up early, staying late, and volunteering for projects no one else wanted. My boss, Lois Gray, noticed the change right away. She pulled me aside one afternoon and said, "Delaney, you've been carrying the team lately. I like what I see." That simple comment felt like the first real recognition I had received in years. I started proposing new ideas in meetings, small improvements to our client tracking system, a better way to organize reports, and Lois encouraged me to lead one of them. For the first time, I wasn't waiting for permission or approval from family. I was earning respect where it actually mattered. I also began volunteering in the community around Madison. The local community center needed help with after-school programs for kids, so I signed up for a weekly slot. It was nothing grand, just helping with homework, organizing games, and listening to the children talk about their days. The work grounded me and reminded me that kindness didn't have to be earned. One of the other volunteers was my colleague, Bonnie Burke. We had worked in the same department for years but never really talked beyond work emails. At the center, we started chatting during breaks. Bonnie had gone through her own family struggles a few years earlier, and she shared just enough to make me feel less alone. "Sometimes you have to choose who gets your energy," she said one evening as we packed up supplies. "It's okay if it's not the people you were born to." Those words stayed with me. As fall turned to early winter, I decided to host my own small Friendsgiving. I invited Bonnie, a couple of people from the volunteer group, and one neighbor I had gotten to know better. No big family production, no expectations, just a simple dinner at my house with turkey sides and pie from the local bakery. We sat around the table laughing about work stories, sharing what we were grateful for that year. Bonnie raised her glass and said, "To new traditions." Everyone clinked glasses, and for the first time in a long time, the room felt full of warmth that wasn't forced or conditional. The evening stretched late with board games and coffee refills. No one asked about my family or why they weren't there. No one made me explain the empty chairs. It was just people who showed up because they wanted to, and that simple fact healed something I hadn't even named yet. I went to bed that night with a quiet sense of accomplishment. I had created a space that belonged to me, not to the expectations of others. The more I invested in these new connections, the less space the old ones occupied in my mind. I stopped checking my parents' social media profiles. I stopped wondering if Jonathan ever thought about me. I started looking forward to Mondays because they meant progress at work, and evenings that might include a call from Bonnie or a quick volunteer shift. The loneliness that had lingered after cutting contact began to fade, replaced by something solid and real, a chosen family made of people who valued me for who I was not, for how well I fit their version of the story. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even sad most days. I was simply moving forward, building a life that didn't require anyone else's permission. And in that quiet rebuilding, I found a strength I didn't know I had been missing. Work began to bring the first results when the weather grew warmer. Lois started trusting me with bigger responsibilities. She assigned me to lead a major client project that had been stalled for months. I restructured the timeline, brought in new data tools, and coordinated the team so smoothly that the client renewed their contract early. During the next all-hands meeting, Lois stood at the front of the room and said, "Delaney turned this around. If you've seen faster deliveries this quarter, thank her." People clapped, and several colleagues came up afterward to congratulate me. It felt strange to be recognized publicly, but it also felt earned. Bonnie became a regular part of my routine. She started inviting me for coffee after work once or twice a week. We sat at the same small cafe near the office talking about everything from project deadlines to life outside the job. She told me about her own decision to distance herself from certain family members years ago. "It wasn't easy," she said, stirring her latte slowly, "but I learned that peace is worth more than forced closeness." I nodded and shared a little about my own situation, not the details, just enough to let her know I understood. Her support was steady and quiet, the kind that didn't demand explanations or pity. The real shift came one afternoon when I was scrolling through LinkedIn during a break. A post from Jonathan caught my eye. He had shared a photo of himself shaking hands with a group of people in suits, the caption reading, "Excited to announce a major contract with Green Space Designs, bringing eco-friendly interior solutions to the Midwest." The image showed a rendering of modern rooms with sustainable materials, recycled wood, low-energy lighting, and plant-integrated walls. The design looked familiar. Too familiar. I opened the full post and read the description. The core concept, modular eco-interiors with customizable plant panels for urban homes, was almost identical to the business plan I had outlined in detail a couple of years earlier during a family video call. I had shared the notes with them because I thought they might be interested in investing or at least offering advice. Jonathan had asked a few questions at the time, then changed the subject. I closed the app and stared at my screen for a long moment. A quiet doubt crept in. It could have been coincidence, I told myself. Ideas like that weren't unique. But the specifics, the exact panel layout, the emphasis on recycled materials sourced locally, even the name green space, echoing a phrase I had used, made it hard to dismiss. I didn't jump to conclusions. I saved the post and the link, then went back to my work. The doubt didn't disappear, though. It sat there small but persistent while I finished the day. I didn't tell Bonnie or anyone else yet. I needed to be sure before I acted. For now, the progress at work kept me grounded. Lois was planning to put me forward for a leadership training program, and the team dynamic felt healthier than it ever had. I focused on the small wins that were mine alone. But the LinkedIn post lingered in the back of my mind. I knew I would have to look closer eventually. Not out of anger, but out of a need to protect what I had built. The warmth of spring outside matched the steady momentum I felt inside. Things were finally moving forward, and I wasn't going to let anything derail them without reason. When the chilly autumn winds began blowing through Madison, I decided to face the truth head-on. I opened my old email folder and pulled up the business plan I had sent to the family group years earlier. It was a detailed document, 20 pages of notes on eco-friendly interior design services, including modular plant panels made from recycled materials, local sourcing strategies, cost breakdowns, and marketing ideas for urban homes. I had shared it during a video call because I was excited about the concept and thought they might offer feedback or even support. Jonathan had asked specific questions at the time: how the panels would be assembled, what certifications I planned to pursue, and how the pricing would work. I had answered everything openly. Now, looking at his company's website and the contract announcement, the similarities were undeniable. The product line they were launching used the exact same panel design, the same emphasis on recycled local materials, and even similar pricing tiers I had calculated. The name Green Space Interiors echoed a phrase I had used in my plan. I cross-referenced screenshots of the announcement with my original file timestamps. The evidence was clear: he had taken my documented plan and presented it as his own to secure the contract. I needed to confirm the financial side before moving forward. I contacted Catherine Park, my bank contact, who had helped me with accounts over the years. I explained the situation briefly and asked her to pull records of the transfer from 2018. She was professional and discreet. Within a day, she sent me the full history: a wire transfer of $25,000 from my savings to my parents' account, labeled as family loan, along with text messages from my father promising repayment once their business stabilized. There was no formal contract, but the electronic trail and the messages constituted clear evidence of an informal agreement. I gathered everything carefully. I compiled the original business plan emails with timestamps, the family call recording snippet where I described the idea, the LinkedIn post and website screenshots showing the identical design, the bank transfer records, and the repayment promise texts. It wasn't about revenge. It was about protecting what was mine and holding them accountable for what they owed. First, I sent a cease and desist letter to Jonathan and the partner company Greenspace Designs. The letter, drafted with basic legal templates I researched online and reviewed by a low-cost service, outlined the unauthorized use of my intellectual property, the documented business plan, and demanded they cease using it immediately. I included copies of the evidence and a deadline for response. I sent it certified mail and email for proof of delivery. Next, I filed a claim in small claims court in Dane County, Wisconsin for the unpaid loan amount. The process was straightforward. I filled out the forms online, paid the filing fee, and attached the bank records and text messages as exhibits. Wisconsin's small claims limit is $10,000, but since the original amount was $25,000, and I was seeking only the principal plus interest and fees, I adjusted the claim to fit the cap, while noting the full debt in the supporting documents. The clerk confirmed it was valid for an informal family loan with evidence of intent to repay. I didn't tell anyone about the steps I was taking, not Bonnie, not Lois, not any friends. I handled it alone quietly because this wasn't about drama or public shaming. It was about closing a chapter that had been open too long. The court date was set for a few weeks later, and I prepared my documents meticulously. I knew the case was strong documented transfer, written promise to repay, and no evidence they had ever intended it as a gift. The waiting period was tense but focused. I kept working, kept volunteering, kept building the life I had started. But underneath the pieces were falling into place. Jonathan had built something on my foundation without permission, and my parents had borrowed money without repaying. Now both matters were being addressed through proper channels. I felt calm, not vengeful, just resolved. When snow blanketed Madison once more, I had fully stepped into a new chapter. The consequences unfolded quickly and without mercy. Jonathan's company lost the major contract almost immediately. Green Space Designs received my cease and desist letter and reviewed the evidence I provided. The original business plan timestamps the family emails, where I detailed the concept the exact matches in their product renderings. They pulled out within days, citing breach of ethical standards in their partnership agreement. The announcement disappeared from their website, and Jonathan's LinkedIn post was taken down. He had built his pitch on stolen work, and once exposed, the damage was irreversible. The deal he had bragged about vanished along with the revenue and credibility he had counted on. The small claims court process moved just as swiftly. The judge reviewed the bank transfer records, the text messages from my father promising repayment, and the lack of any evidence showing the $25,000 as a gift. Judgment was entered in my favor for the full principal plus interest and court fees. My parents were ordered to pay, and the ruling became public record. They didn't appear at the hearing, which only strengthened my position. Collection would take time, but the legal obligation was now undeniable. The money they had borrowed years ago without ever intending to return was finally being addressed through the system. The social fallout was quieter, but just as devastating. Word spread in our local community. Madison is small enough that people talk. Friends of friends mentioned hearing about the situation, and my parents' social circle began to distance themselves. Relatives who once commented enthusiastically on every post about Jonathan and his daughter now stayed silent. Neighbors who used to wave at family gatherings stopped asking about holidays. My mother mentioned in a rare text to a mutual acquaintance that things were complicated, but the explanation didn't satisfy anyone. They had always presented themselves as the perfect family, and the truth, favoritism, theft of ideas, unpaid debts, shattered that image. They became the ones people whispered about, not me. For me, the period brought a profound shift. At work, Lois promoted me to a supervisory role after the successful project. The team respected me more, and I felt confident leading without second-guessing every decision. Bonnie and the friends from volunteer work became my regular circle. We had dinners, weekend hikes, and quiet evenings talking about life. They didn't judge my past. They celebrated my present. I no longer felt the need to explain why I wasn't inviting family to events. I had built something stronger, a chosen family that showed up because they wanted to, not because they felt obligated. No contact became permanent. I never responded to the sporadic messages that came in after the court ruling. My phone stayed silent from their numbers. I didn't block them outright. I simply didn't engage. There was no dramatic confrontation, no final conversation. The silence was complete, and it felt like freedom. I stopped carrying the guilt of being the problem child. I stopped wondering if they would ever change. They wouldn't, and that was no longer my burden. Looking back, the biggest lesson I learned is that family isn't defined by blood alone. It's defined by respect, accountability, and mutual care. When those things are missing, it's okay to walk away. You don't owe anyone your peace. You don't have to keep forgiving the same hurts just because they're from the same people. Protecting yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. And when you do, you create space for real connections that lift you up instead of holding you down. Thank you to everyone who has listened to my story all the way through. It means more than you know to share this and know others are out there who understand. If this resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family? What helped you move forward? Your experiences remind us we're not alone.